Hello and welcome back to the Black Dad Brand podcast. I'm your host, Jameel Pugh, and I'm joined by my co-host, Ray Green of Ray Green Ministries. And today we got two special guests who's coming all the way from Georgia. We have Ebony, who is a doula, and we also have Mike Bailey, who is the Global Marketing Director for John Deere. But today's episode, we're going to talk specifically about our Black parenting journey, professionalism, our professional careers, and so much more. But Ebony and Mike both have 5 children together. So I'm sure they've covered the gamut of things when it comes to parenting because each child is different. But I'm so interested to learn more about your stories, more about how you guys have navigated parenting as Black folks. And so I see you guys repping HBCUs. And so I just know that that's going to be a good part of the discussion as well. But I'm so happy to have you on the show today.
Thank you.
Excellent. So Ray, you want to jump in with our first question for our guest today?
Yes, happy to. So, Ebony, Mike, I think all the viewers just heard that you actually have 5 beautiful babies. Tell us the story. How did all that happen? You have no twins in there at all. Tell us how that happened, your love story, your journey as a Black family.
So I will say the Lord knew what he was doing when he decided to not give me twins, because I can't even imagine. But yeah, 5 kids. I always say we have a basketball team and no subs. We have our bookends. Our oldest and our youngest are both boys, and then 3 girls in between. Mike and I met a long time ago, almost 17 years ago. No, almost 18 years ago. We met, and I used to work for Big Brothers Big Sisters, where my job was to recruit African American men and women to become big brothers and big sisters. So I was at all of the networking events in Iowa. Yes, there are Black folks in Iowa.
Wow.
And Mike was at one of these events. And at the time, he had locks. I remember he had on this blue cashmere sweater, and I was like, who that over there? And one of our mutual friends, Karina, was like, "Oh, that's Mike Bailey." And I was like, "Oh, okay, what table he sitting at? Go tell him to come sit over here." And so he did. And then he just followed me around for like the next, 18 years.
That's your story, Mike. You want to add to that, or
Hey, you better agree.
And I'm sure there's a lot of dads and men out there that know that's exactly how it happened. Have anything? It's been a beautiful story. What we didn't know is that we actually both came from large families. So I come from a family of 5. Ebony comes from a family of 5 as well, and so we both were accustomed to being around brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews. And so it wasn't a scenario where we only intended to have 1 kid and it turned into 5. I think we wanted a large family. And I would even say Ebony probably about 2 months ago said, "Hey, what about 6?" So factory shut down. No more. 5 is going to be where we ended. But again, I think just a heart for Ebony has a huge heart for just being a mom. Purpose intertwined with that, even as being a doula.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I can't wait to get into hearing about the doula services and how you got into all of that. I am curious. So I come from a family of 5 brothers and sisters as well. I don't know, Jameel, how many do you have in your family?
I was raised as an only child, so this is like completely foreign to me. Like the fact that this many people in the house would drive me crazy. Like I have 2 kids right now, and they feel like roommates. So I'm really struggling with that many people in my space.
Right. So with 5, one of the ways that we want to ask you all is parenting 1 is a challenge in itself. How do you parent 5? How has your parenting style changed? And where do you find yourself at right now with 5 children?
Well, I think it's pretty interesting because our oldest is 18 and our youngest is 3. So that's a huge, those are 2 different worlds and 2 different parenting styles that we have to accommodate specifically for those 2 boys. And boys and girls are very different as well.
Amen.
So yeah, it's craziness over here. I feel like girls come out sassy, like straight up. They're like, we're ready to take over. And so we started off our journey as young parents, and you grow, right? So you lean on, for me, it was leaning on my sister, who has my sisters who have always kind of been my go-to for parenting on what to do and what not to do. As well as, like any other, I feel like young Black family, we're looking at the Huxtables and, we're looking at different role models that we see on TV and envisioning what we want to incorporate with our own children. So I would say one of the things that often happens to us is people say, which one of you have been in the military? Solely based off of our parenting style. I think that we do have very high expectations for our kids. They help out in the house, right? So our 6-year-old and 8-year-old, hey, go get your laundry done. You got to figure it out. I don't ever want them to be the kids who don't know how to take care of themselves and are always so heavily dependent on someone else doing something for them. So we have really high expectations in the household as well as academically. Mike comes from a family of educators, where his siblings are principals and administrators and teachers, and so has a heart for that, for education as well. I worked for the government for 8 years as a project manager before resigning and becoming a stay-at-home mom, which was not something that I would have ever imagined for my life at all. You couldn't have, there's no way you could have told me that I was going to ever be a stay-at-home mom. And fortunate and blessed enough to be able to be in that position, but it really opened my eyes to teaching my children, things that I just felt like they should know, right? So, our 8-year-old, when she went to kindergarten, she was already at a 3rd grade reading level. And it wasn't like this was my goal for her. It was like, hey, we're going to practice these sight words. We're going to ask your auntie and uncles like what they suggest, and we're just going to run with it. We're just going to wing it and make it happen. And that's what we did. But what's also interesting too is that as we get older, I think that we become a little bit more laxed. And so hearing our 18-year-old and our 13-year-old say, you would have never let us do this when we were 3, or you would have never let us do that when we were 6. It's always really funny to me, and a telltale sign of how things have changed, and how we have changed as parents to parent each of our children a little bit differently based on what their needs are.
Yeah, that's good. Mike, would you want to add anything to that? I mean, we're both Black dads here as well, and just from a male's perspective, how important is it for you to be in the home? How do you balance that, your parenting styles, and what advice would you give, I'll say fathers of multiples, that may be listening?
Yeah, I think as you mostly, I'd probably give yourself a little bit of grace as you're trying to figure it out. And as we were, journeying to being a parent, a lot of what you bring is what you know. And sometimes what you know isn't right. It's just what you know. It's what feels comfortable. And so I was always raised, hey, your job is to be kind of the provider, to be the protector. And it wasn't about being emotionally there for the kids. In many cases, it wasn't about being a friend or hanging out with the kids. It was like, hey, I'm your dad. I'm not your friend. I'm going to make sure the lights are on. I'm going to make sure there's food at the table. And make sure there's a house to live in. And that meant being a good dad, right? And so as you become a dad, and you think about doing those things and having multiple, I know Ebony in many cases was like, hey, I need some help. And my view was, well, that's not my job. Like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing over here. You're asking me to help, but you're not, how are you going to come help me come to work? Right? Are you going to help me do this? And so trying to find what works for you in your relationship, in your situation, is probably one thing that helps us continue to refine what's working, what's not working for our journey. The other one is I often think about, do my kids want to call me when they're 22 years old, when they're 30 years old? And so growing up saying, I'm not your friend, I'm your dad, but the relationship that makes people want to call and stay connected is friendship. It's not this figure of authority that's only there for direction. And so finding ways to challenge myself, I would say, out of my comfort zone to what do my kids enjoy doing and how do I show interest in those things, whether I like them or not. Playing video games or reading books or, it could be worms outside, because those are the little moments where you start to build relationship. And you can be a parent and a friend. Those things can coexist. And so that's a bit thing. And I would say that's not complete. That's an evolution. That's a journey. Yeah, as you mentioned, we got a 3-year-old and an 18-year-old, and how we show up and become friends and emotionally support as well as direct is very different. Two boys, those are the two we mentioned, but the 3 girls in the middle as well.
So I have a question and a comment. One of the things I just recently heard was, the only people are going to remember that you worked late are your children, right? Like when you get older, they're going to be the only ones that are going to be remember, like, man, you were never there, or you were never a part of this. And so my thought is, I identify what you're saying as a man who thinks, okay, my role is to provide, my role is to make sure that my wife and kids have everything that they need and that they can experience things in life. How do you show up and give all of your kids that individual time and build that relationship with them? And I'm just thinking that from a sheer numbers perspective, right? Like you said, like you got to show up differently for that 18-year-old. And it's it could be just sitting there watching Bluey with your 3-year-old, right? So how do you, keep those work commitments, right? Because you have a very large role, but also the bigger role of being a father for all 5.
That's a great question, and I would say one that I wrestle with. What comes to mind is we often, Eb and I, talk, and we'll say, "What do you think the kids are going to remember?" Right? How are their memories going to be shaped? And it was a professor who was taught in MBA school that was talking about this because your time is going to be demanding. And what he said is, you need to spend time building rituals. Rituals or habits are what the kids are going to remember. And so no matter what it is, it could be watching Bluey, it could be building something, it could be taking a walk, but it's going to be the rituals that are going to really be the roots of your relationship. And so that's something that has always stuck in my mind. So Thanksgiving, for example, years ago, Ebony, I think it was Ebony's idea, but she said, "Hey, Thanksgiving, let's make that our holiday. We're going to make sure family comes to our house, and that's going to be one of the rituals that we do." The other one is around Christmas. Now, those are the macro rituals. Micro standpoint, how do I, and this is something I'm still not good at, but how do I build those rituals with Elijah? So one recently has been working out, right? So, hey, we're benching. You're trying to get to 225 to bench press? Me too. So finding that thing that starts to build a ritual of conversation that can carry us probably for the next 10, 15 years, from a health standpoint. So that's to me the answer. Now, often we all know it is just because you know what to do doesn't mean you're doing it. Now, the hard part is carving out the time to build the ritual. And that's something that I'm still actively working towards, I think, with the kids.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful, because I was kind of leaning into the other question just around balance, and I'm really interested in hearing the story of Ebony soon. Like, how did you get into where you're at, Mike? What was your journey there? But this comment on balance, I like how you said rituals allow you to have like that. Rituals are what they remember, right? How do you also have balance in the relationship? As a Black man, as a Black mother, there's a lot of stress factors, as we all know, that can inhibit that. And having 5 children all at once, how do you all balance? I mean, I follow you a little bit on Instagram. I see you travel all a lot, but what advice would you give Ebony, to the men watching, to be mindful of, to balance that? And then Mike, what advice would you have for the men watching as well?
So I think that balance is this word that we use thinking that everything is going to be equal. It's not. There are going to be times in your life where you're going to give more to work and less to family, or more to family and less to work, right? And each of them are going to have pros and cons. So I would say try not to think of it as balance. Think of it as a give and take. It's a dance, right? So when Mike is traveling a lot, when he comes home, he's more intentional about how we spend time together, or how he individually spends time together with the kids. And we can set that up like, hey, the girls really want to go to Target. And so like, okay, we call them the littles. Well, I'll take the littles to Target. And then we have to set a little bit of rules in there, right? Like, yo, they can only spend $50 because Mike will let them come back with half of Target. And I'm like, no, sorry, we're not going to do that. So that's how we kind of work together. But I think for what is most important to me, and I feel like could be the most beneficial, is making sure that you understand your own, everybody has trauma. What is your own emotional trauma or baggage that you bring into not only your relationship, but also into your parenting? And how does it show up, right? Do you have a parent who was hardly at home? And so now you feel like you have to be this overarching parent who's always there and always involved with your kids and not giving them the space to form their own identity? Or do you have parents who, were just overbearing, right? Or way too lax. And so now your house is a kick it house and y'all doing things that really shouldn't be happening. So how do you navigate that space?
Mhm.
And so I feel like Mike and I were both very intentional about, even when we were dating, talking about our upbringing. What are things that are really important to you? And what are things that you're like, I absolutely don't want this to be incorporated into our household? Literally making a list, right? Yelling is a big deal. And so he's like, yo, we're not going to have a household where we're yelling. That's a no-go for me. That's a non-negotiable. And I would say I'm not a yeller, but I am a fusser. Hurry up, pick this up. What are you doing? Do this, do this, do that, right? And Mike is a very like, if the benchmark is 10, I'm gonna need you to really be at like a 15. And so then I'm like, well, I mean, 11 and a half, 12 will do, right? Like we good. Let's kind of meet in the middle. So really balancing off of each other, and making sure that you have those really hard conversations before you decide to have a family, because people show up differently and their trauma shows up differently once that baby gets there.
Mm.
I want to kind of go back to that right there. You talk about having those hard conversations, and you also said something I wanted to talk about. Maybe it kind of weaves together. You talked about being your child's teacher. And so I'm just wondering, what are the conversations that you guys had about, what are those hard conversations that you had to have prior to having kids and to come together to agree on? Like, give us an example of what that looks like. For me right now, my wife and I are kind of going back and forth on what school we want to send our kid to. My wife's a social worker. She's into the social emotional stuff. And I'm the high achiever. I won't say high achiever, I would say overachiever, right? Like I want my kids to, reach a certain level. And so we're trying to find that balance as to like, what's more important? Right. And my wife says, parent the kid you got, not the one you want. And I'm always like, we create the one we want, but it's a conversation. So I'm just curious to know, what were those conversations prior to?
Oh, so there were several of them. The two that stick out the most to me were cussing. I come from a household where we will rip you to pieces with our words. And we're not like overly affectionate. And Mike's family is literally the complete opposite. His mom is like, all of my kids walk on water. Honey, you can't tell me nothing about them. They're the greatest thing since sliced bread. I love you every 5 minutes, lots of hugs and just lots of affection, right? And I was like, oh Lord, what is this? What is happening in this black household? Like, why do we keep hugging? This is foreign to me. And so I would be like, oh, okay, I got to hug you back. Okay, this is weird, right? But it was just something that I didn't receive. So we talked about affection, we talked about cussing, and he was like, absolutely not. Like, we not cussing in front of our kids, period. And cuss words, I mean, like, they run the gamut, right? So if you say stupid in my house, something is stupid, the littles are like, oh my God, I can't believe you just called something stupid. Like, it is the end of the world to them. Because we have been very intentional about articulate what it is that you're feeling and what you need and what you want. So you don't get to just point and we're not doing that. What is it that you want? Oh, you want those orange chips right there? Okay, well then say that. Like, let me give you the language and the confidence to say exactly what you want. So we talked a lot about that. We talked a lot about spankings. I didn't grow up getting spankings at all. I grew up in that I wish you would try me if you want to, like spank me. What? Absolutely not. And Mike was like, we got spankings in our household. It wasn't often, but we got them, right? And so it was finding this balance between, okay, we're not going to do that, but what else can we do? And we started doing like wall sits. and our now 13-year-old could hold a wall sit for like 5 minutes, a plank for 5 minutes. And we were like, damn, these kids gonna be crazy strong. Maybe we need to come up with something else. Maybe we gotta write sentences. Like, what are we doing, right? So those things where we just are growing with our kids, we had a lot of those conversations. And even with our daughter, she's 13 and we look the same, like we're shaped the same. And so it's a continuous conversation about what is appropriate attire for her. What does that look like? A dad's perspective and a mom's perspective is very different.
Absolutely.
And so while we're wanting them to both be, wanting our daughter to be confident and respect her body, understanding that there are people out there who could care less about her respecting her body or them respecting her. And so how do we teach her those boundaries and how to navigate life when people are looking at you in a way that may make you feel uncomfortable? How do you speak up or remove yourself from the situation? So we had a lot of those types of conversations around education, really wanting our kids to go to HBCUs. We are absolutely, so I was gung-ho, like, you got to go for your first year. If you don't like it after that, we will support your decision to transfer. But year one, pick a school because that's where you're going and that's it. I don't care. So yeah, a lot of just conversations around what our expectations are for our family, the duties in our household, and how we want our kids to ultimately feel about themselves.
Maybe a couple of things I think to add to Ebony. So everything she said, right, is real. When I think of balance, it's the same thing. It creates this mental image of this scale of something winning and losing. But I like to reframe it to you got life, right? And in life you got things that you're committed to and you make sacrifices for, and you got other things that aren't important. And always managing these multiple things, and very rarely, to Ebony's point, do you ever get or achieve balance. But what you want to achieve is, are you spending your time on the things that are important? And are you not spending your time on the things that are not important? And what I do think can happen is sometimes we're not clear about what's important. We'll say, hey, it's God, then it's family, and then it's work. But then if you look at where you spend your time, it's watching basketball, hanging out with the fellas, and then it's this and this, that. And so I think really holding yourself accountable to probably no balance, but there are priorities. And with priorities come commitment and sacrifice. One of the things that really I challenge myself was with work, and you mentioned it, and being challenged to want to be better. You spend a lot of time learning and growing and matriculating through work. And I remember one day thinking, like, man, when's the last time I read a parenting book? How serious have I been about learning how to be a parent, learning how to have a conversation with my 13-year-old daughter, learning how to, and if I'm saying that my family is the most important, my kids are the greatest investment that I've got, I don't know if my actions are matching that, right? And that's not anybody else's fault. That's not my parents' fault. That's something I got to look in the mirror and feel and understand what I'm going to do different there. Recently, it was really, as Eb and I, because we're married, so the other piece is trying to spend time on our marriage, right? And making sure that we just don't become mom and dad, but we can maintain, husband and wife, as well as our individuality. But it took us down a path of the 7 languages of love, right? And understanding what those are. But it was really cool. We did it with our kids. We had our kids fill out a questionnaire, and it helped us understand how they receive love. And that's one of the things that I would say we could have done that sooner, right? If I could have done that when they were 3 or 5 years old, I would have parented different because I would have better understood how they feel love versus how I wanted to demonstrate or show them love. And so some of it was like, oh yeah, we do that. Other was like, man, I had no idea. We probably got that wrong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's just a tool, right? That I think parents or folks that are listening could give an insight, not only to you and your wife, but for sure, how do your kids experience love, and make sure that you're speaking that language that they feel love.
And again, that was the 7 love languages. And they have one for teens too, I believe, right? Is that the one you're referring to? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. All right. Now I want to get into the professional side of things. Mike, Ebony tells us that you are one of the youngest Black global leaders that John Deere has at the moment. Talk about like what is that position? How did you get there, and like who helped you along the way? And I also know that you also give back to other young men of color wanting to get into the field. So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, just thank you, Ebony, for hyping me up, baby.
You're welcome.
But no, it's it definitely comes from, I would say, initially I was even talking to my son. I say, hey, sometimes you're running to something, sometimes you're running away from something. And I think a lot of my success in the early years was me running away from something. I was like, hey, I'm not going to be broke. Like, we grew up, we weren't poor because we didn't have a poor mindset, but money was tight. Like, we had to figure out how to patch stuff together. And you don't really realize until you get older and you're looking back like, oh, we use olive oil for lotion? Like, I didn't know that was like, or we did this, or, you guys didn't eat potted meat and Vienna sausages. So you just know what you know, and you get older, like, man. So great things are, it was great that we didn't grow up with the mindset of being poor, but we grew up just not having a lot of money. So I made an active decision. Hey, I don't want to be broke. I want to make decisions that are going to lead me to having the opportunity or choice to go on vacation, or choice to have a wife that can stay home, or choice to. And so I didn't really chase my passions. I chased what was going to logically provide me with that kind of a lifestyle. And I didn't realize that. So I went to a high school math teacher, started teaching high school math, and I'm making maybe $30,000 a year, right? And so I went to Tuskegee. My boys, computer science majors, veterinarians, engineers, their starting salary is like 70,000. And I'm like, we paid the same for school, right? Pay the exact same tuition. I'm over here making 30,000, and it's not easy. Like, teaching is hard. I'm tired at the end of the day. I'm making a difference, but it's not as big of a difference that I think I would like. And I said, hey, is this, I was raised, money. You don't want to chase money, right? And so where do I think I can add value? And what I landed on was with opportunity. I want to be in a position in life where I see some opportunities. I may not know anything about engineering, and I didn't. My first introduction was my boys or classmates at Tuskegee. My family were educators, so I'm teaching. That's what I went into. And so one of the questions that we often ask kids is, hey, what do you do? What are you passionate about? I think it's a really hard question. I think Michelle Obama was like, it's actually a question you shouldn't ask people. Because no one knows. I mean, I'm 20 years with the company now. I wouldn't have been able to say this is what I wanted to do at 18, let alone 16, even 22 or 25, right? And so I think it was a bit of, what lifestyle do I want? And then if I'm logically thinking on, well, how much money do I need to make to have that lifestyle? And if I'm a teacher now, as a high school math teacher, what's the next best move I can make that'll put me on a trajectory to have that lifestyle? And it was industrial engineering. I didn't know anything about industrial engineering other than if you had a math major undergrad, you can get an industrial engineering master's degree in 2 years. And then the next part was, I don't want to pay for it. So what school is going to let me go to this program? So I majored in industrial engineering with the emphasis in occupational safety and ergonomics. Did I love any of that? No. But it was the way I viewed. This was my walk. It was my view of how I was going to get to the next level, right? Just playing chess, right? How am I going to position myself to have? Now, once I start working in Deere, or John Deere, I started to be like, hey, I like this, right? Not only on the corporate side, I like the idea that I can recruit other Black men into the company, other Black women into the company, other people of color into the company. And once they get in, I can make sure that I give them the game on how to be successful. And so as I'm growing, I'm bringing people along, right? From an intrinsic reward, it's nothing like saying, man, hey, I got this guy on course to be a millionaire, right? And if I potentially wasn't where I was, where I needed to be, they may not be on that course. Now, there's so and Deere got a pretty good aspect of feeding the world, right? So we're doing things that make a difference in communities. So I would say, so along the way, I think that was probably the early phases. That was me running away from something. Then it became running to something. So now I'm working and I start to understand what's possible. And I've got networks and relationships. I'm doing well in my job. I've got mentors both inside of work, outside of work. I got a group of friends that are having success in their careers as well. And so I'm surrounded with people who are, I would say, like-minded and progressively thinking. And now I'm starting running to, well, hey, what do I want to be in 5 years? Right? Where can I add the most value in 5 years? And once you set the mark, then it's about, well, what are you doing to get there? Right? And so everything is, I think one of my favorite quotes is, whether you think you can or think you can't,
You're right.
You're right.
So that mindset is like, well, if you don't think you can, stop. Right? If you can't convince yourself, how are you even talking to other people? And so really drive some accountability inside of that. But you know how mentorship is, as soon as you start mentoring, it also helps you hold yourself accountable for what you're telling other people to do. And so, being a leader in the company and having mentees that are like, hey man, Mike, I'm looking up to you. I would have done this, but I'm glad I was able to call you. So all of those things. But at the end of the day, and I think even on this call, just being approachable. So being able to be a Black executive at Deere that I can walk up and I'm gonna give you the grip. What's up, brother? How you doing? You know what I mean? You need to know where you need to get your haircut. I know we and I one. You can go to this barber. So I'm not talking about work first. I'm talking about you first. And the only reason that's what was given to me. But that's what's sticky, and that's what matters, right? So maybe I answered your question, Ray. I went all over the place, a little bit of rambling, but hopefully I got it.
Mike, I think you did a master class on goal setting, and you dropped so many gems in there, and hopefully people will rewind this and go back and pick out and pull from all the things he said in terms of setting a goal, having mentors, holding yourself accountable, evaluating who you are, chasing opportunities, running from something, running to something. Like, there was so much in there, but I really want to go back to one thing that you said. So I think you said, but I want you to really do it justice. You talked about being poor versus being broke and the mindset between those two. And then I got a couple questions for Ebony, but I want you to just kind of like give us the game as to what you mean in terms of the difference between being poor or being broke.
No, and I'll give you my perspective of how I interpret it. And so taking a person that doesn't have money, say a broke person, and you give them an opportunity, they're going to return on that opportunity. Almost like the biblical story of your talents. Right? With that, right? So broke is just a circumstance. It's a state of being where I think the mindset of poor is something where if you give that same person an opportunity, they're not going to take advantage of it. They'll find themselves in the spiral or circle. So you can think about like a lottery. There's people who win $1 million in the lottery, and they were broke. They didn't have any money, and they find themselves in 5 years broke again. That's a poor mindset, right? Where another person may get that same amount of money. They found ways to kind of grow through that. Now, this isn't a causation, right? Why do you have a poor mindset versus a broke mindset? This isn't a causation, but it is a recognition that there is a difference of state where you're at and knowing that you can get out of that state versus a repetition. And we all see it, right? I've got cousins, family members who, live in the projects, 4th, 5th generation. They can't figure out how to get out of their own way. And they're not stupid, right? They're smart. They're in honest classes, but it's this mindset of what's possible that keeps them locked. That's my view on it.
I want to really quickly read this quote. My mentor used to beat this into my head. It's a quote from Carter G. Woodson. And as you were saying, it reminded me of this. It says, if you control a man's thinking, you do not have to worry about his action. When you determine what a man shall think, you don't have to concern yourself about what he will do. If you make a man feel that he is inferior, you do not have to compel him to accept his inferior status, for he will seek it himself. And if you make a man think that is justly an outcast, you do not have to order him to the back door. He will go without being told. And if there is no back door, his very nature will demand one. So when you talked about the mindset of being poor, it brought me right to that quote. So thank you for clarifying that. And if you don't mind, Ray, I'd like to ask Ebony a quick question here. Ebony, you talked about transitioning into a stay-at-home mom, highly educated woman like yourself, having to evolve to be there for her children. But you also talked about being an entrepreneur to your core. right? And now having your own business and being a doula. Talk about the evolving that you've had to do to both find yourself and or recreate yourself, right? But also like prioritizing being a mom. And I know that balance is really tough for women. And you know, as a man, I didn't really understand it at first until I had my own kids in terms of like the sacrifice that a mom has to make. And the one thing that really got me was the fact that my kids are like 2 years old almost and still breastfeeding. And I'm like that right there alone, women need way more time, you know what I mean, to be able to just do stuff. I mean, I'm watching, you know, women who play in the WNBA, and I'm like, yo,
Yeah.
like who's like, you know what I'm saying? So I understand so much more now in terms of not just the mental and emotional component, but the physical aspect of being a mom and being tethered to these children for years. So I'm just curious about how you have evolved over, you know, your career, considering the amount of children you have.
So I think that it starts with working, right? I came from a single parent household where it was like just instilled in me that no one's going to take care of you. You take care of you. And that's it. So I was in a job where I liked what I did, but the environment was just toxic, where I was severely depressed. I was just crying all the time and like angry and just couldn't tolerate it. And I'll never forget, I called Mike and I was crying and I said, I can't do it anymore. And he was like, I told you to quit 3 years ago, but you over here thinking you got to be superwoman and got to do it on your own. So go ahead and bump your head, but quit if you want to quit. And I was like, are you sure? And he was like, listen, it's your choice. I went to my desk, packed up my stuff. It was like, holla at you, never. You will never see me again, ever. And it was this super empowering movement of like, yes, I'm taking a stance in my life, right?
Yeah.
I woke up the next morning and was like, oh my God, I got a job. Like, what am I going to do? Who am I without a job? Because my whole identity had been wrapped up in working for the government and being a project manager and being a mom, yes, but having to say, hey, can I be off work because my kid has a field trip, right? I'm like, that's not what I'm trying to do. Like, I don't like that life. So it did take me a good year of figuring out who I was and who I wanted to be. And Mike kept saying, do the work, figure it out. Now you have the space in your life to sit back every single day and figure out who you want to be. And then figure out how you're going to get there.
Yeah.
And that for me was a foreign space to be in. I was very uncomfortable. And I have a husband who would challenge me on a regular basis. What you gonna do? Not that you have to go find another job, but what is it that's gonna bring you joy?
Wow.
And it was just helping people. So I started going and like volunteering at the local elementary schools. I was like, give me the kid that you all deem lost or bad. Give me that one. Give me that child. And it just was, I'm a very nurturing person. And so we moved in a new environment. We moved when I was 7 months pregnant and I was livid. I like my provider. I'm going to drive 2.5 hours to deliver this baby. I will not go to some brand new provider. And Mike was like, okay, go ahead. Do whatever you feel like you want to do. But at the end of the day, you're going to have this baby. So I support whatever you want to do. And so my older two were already in school. And so once I had my baby, it was like, okay, what do we do now, right? Like, how am I engaging at home? What is it that I want to teach her? So we're reading books and playing, and I got involved in a local church and all the things. But I didn't quite feel 100% fulfilled at all. Because although I was very happy with being a mom, I knew that I had more to offer, and I wasn't quite sure how I was going to incorporate being a mom and offer those things. So then I transitioned to mentoring college students, and specifically college students who were adopted by white families but were Black. And so they would come over my house. I would do their hair, teach them about natural hair. We did YouTube videos. They would teach me how to cook their traditional meals. It was just like this give and take where we were both feeding each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had this network, which I didn't know that that's what God was doing at the time, but I had this network of like babysitters, right? So then when I stepped into birth work, at any given moment, I had a rotation of 5 college students that had been in my life for multiple years that I could call and say, hey, I got to go to a birth. Can you come over? And they'd be like, yes. You got a room downstairs? Like, we good, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the mindset was, I want to be able to not just be a stay-at-home mom, because to me that had this negative, like, you think you too good, you bougie kind of, context to it. And I was like, nah, I'm out here in the community for the community. And let me show you that I can do both. And so I also always wanted specifically my daughters, to not feel like they had to be in a position where someone was always taking care of them, right? How do you take care of yourself too? How do you do what you're passionate about? And so if you ask my kids right now, like, what is a doula or what does mom do? They would have no issues explaining it to you.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So just kind of really incorporating the work-life structure of setting good examples for my kids, as well as fulfilling who Ebony Bailey is. At my core, I'm a person who wants to give back and wants to be able to be engaged in the community. And so how do I best do that? By reaching people where they're at. And that starts before you even think about conceiving. And then now that you have conceived, all of these fears come up. And so how can I help you navigate parenting in a way that's going to be best beneficial to your family?
No, that's great. And I know we're getting short on time, but curious to know, we've covered doula, what a doula is, how to seek out doula. I've actually played you the video. There were some things that you said we didn't do justice to. But before we go there and we get ready to wrap up, what got you into becoming a doula? And then just to re-describe to those who are watching, like, what is a doula? How do you find one?
Yeah, absolutely.
All of those things.
So we'll start with what is a doula. There are several different types of doulas. I am a birth and postpartum doula, which means as a birth doula, I'm providing physical, educational, and emotional support to the birthing family. Not the birthing person, but the family, meaning the mom, the dad, the grandma, the auntie, the whoever is a part of that family's village. And I think that it takes a village to mother a mother. So that she can mother her kids. And so as we're providing that educational support and that balance and teaching these families how to advocate for themselves. So at a young age, you go to the doctor, right? And the doctor is always talking to the adult, not the kid. And so then you grow up thinking that this provider is the hierarchy. So whatever they tell you you have to do is what you do. And you feel like you can't push back and ask questions to gain a better understanding. And so my first job is to say, what is it that you want? So I always tell my families, if you could give birth anywhere in the world and have whatever smells or colors around you, what would it be? And visualize that. And then how do we create that in a setting that is more realistic for you, right? So you want to give birth in the woods. I don't know if I could give you that, but I could play some woodsy music in the hospital setting, right? Or you could have a home birth or whatever. So getting them to understand that, and then also getting them to understand that the provider actually works for you. You don't work for them. And so you get to ask questions, you get to give pushback, and you get to make sure that you leave every single appointment with a clear understanding of what's happening to not only you, but what is also happening to your child. So as a birth doula, I provide that education during the pregnancy phase. I attend births, both in person and virtually, depending on what the family is ideally wanting and hospital rules sometimes. And then I also provide postpartum care for 6 weeks. That is educating you on how you choose to feed your baby, whether that's formula or bottle or breastfeeding. And and then how to take care of yourself, how to make sure you're getting the proper nutrition. And I call it a postpartum support plan. Who's your village? Who are the people that you can lean on? Who are you going to be able to call at 3 o'clock in the morning and say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm tired. I'm hungry. I just need something or someone. Who can you call? I literally have to make a list of those people. I'll contact those people. Hey, I want you to know that you are a part of this village and you are an instrumental part of this village. I need you to show up. So that's what I do as a birth doula. As a postpartum doula, I come into your home after you've had the baby, talk through your birth story with you. If there's been any obstacles that happen or trauma that happened during the labor and delivering process, help you navigate those, connect you with community partners, meaning mental health therapists, chiropractors, pelvic floor therapists, whatever it is that you may need. A chef if you need some education around nutrition. So I take care of all those resources. And a postpartum doula can be in your life for up to a year because you're hiring them for a certain amount of hours. And then I also do breastfeeding services as well. So talking about proper latch and the weaning process. I breastfed my youngest until he was 2.5. So I understand that journey of having someone attached to you like their life depend on it, even when it don't. It's craziness, but it is a bonding experience that is like no other. It just is. So that's a lot of what I do. Now, what brought me to doula work is pregnant with my third. My first 2 births were somewhat traumatic, but I didn't realize how traumatic they were until I got pregnant and delivered my third. Had a midwife who said, first appointment, how do you want this birth to go? And I was like, oh, hell nah. She knew. She knew. Like, fresh out of midwifery school. No, thank you. Give me somebody else with some experience. And I told her that. And she was like, I mean, I'm not the one having the baby. You are. And it was this light bulb moment of, I get to create the space that I want my child to come into. And that is a story that's going to live with them forever. I'd never felt so empowered in my life. And that midwife, Catherine, is somebody who is still my mentor that I stay in contact with on a regular basis. But it gave me the edge to say, this is what I want. And so after having this beautiful birthing experience, I decided, how do I navigate that for other people? And so I got involved in the Liberian community and became the community auntie. And so anytime somebody got pregnant or was at the hospital, they would call me and I would show up, have my baby in tow. And I'm like, all right, what we doing? What we talking about? Like, what's happening? And was fortunate enough to have a husband who was like, when you come back from a birth, you don't feel drained and overwhelmed. You are like beaming with pride and joy, right? So each of my clients became not just a client, but a family member to me. And so I care for them. I love on them. I still keep in contact with majority of them. And so that experience with the midwife just kind of sparked and ignited something that was already in me, a seed that had already been planted, but hadn't been watered. And so she watered that seed. And from there, things just kind of took off. And I became, for the state of Iowa, the first Black doula in Iowa, and said, I'm not about to be the only one. We're going to spread the wealth and create more Black doulas and more entrepreneurs. And so that's what formed the Iowa Black Doula Collective. And to date, it's been 3 years. We've trained 64 Black women to become doulas in the state of Iowa.
Amen.
Congrats. Yeah. Congrats on that. We're going to be wrapping up really quick. I want you guys to fill in the sentence with just a few words, okay? Just kind of like a speed round before we close. Being a Black dad means.
Good. This is good. Being a Black dad means you set the tone for future generations.
Nice.
If I was to answer that, I would say a Black dad. Being a Black dad means responsibility. Responsibility to your children, your partner, to their future, to their well-being, their safety. You're contributing to all of that. And to me, you cannot avoid that level of responsibility. You've chosen, you position yourself to have these children. This is what comes with that. What about for you? How would you answer that?
Oh, Black Dad is a legacy. It's legacy. I just think of building, honestly. Like just it's building legacy. That's all I could think about, honestly. Um,
I want to
I'll
ask
go.
Ebony
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
though.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I was gonna
I
say,
was gonna go to her too.
oh, okay, because oftentimes, when you think about like, from a man who may be
Yeah,
single and you may want to get with this woman that you're pursuing, she got in her mind too what you need to be in order for you to, you know what I'm saying? So, Ebony, please speak on behalf of the sisters out there and give us an idea of what that Black woman is looking for when you think you are finna just, take on that first date and all that. I'm just curious to think like, what is
Yeah.
Black?
So I will tell you, I am a daddy's girl. You can't tell me nothing about my daddy. I will go to the end of the earth for him. No questions asked. So to me, being a Black father means taking care of you so that you can take care of others and understanding that you don't have to do it alone. I think that Black men specifically feel like I gotta toughen up. I can't ask for help. I can do this and I can do it by myself versus having that mindset of, let me go ask dude down the street who also got 5 kids because there's probably something that I can gain from him. So I wish that Black men would understand the power that comes from a village, from support, from mentorship, from understanding that you're not out here alone.
that's
Okay.
good. Next question. A healthy birth experience is
When you come out not only physically safe, but emotionally safe.
Mike.
Yeah, I would say it's one that when people say it's the most important day and most memorable day of their life, it's a good memory. It's the one that you would have had a chance to write down and you had an opportunity to live it.
Nice.
Yeah, Ebony's answer kind of stuck with me. It's like, I feel like for me, when I went in for both of my children, a healthy delivery would have been me coming home with both my child and my wife with no scars, no mental, emotional scars, but, we're able to walk out of here together and looking forward to what's in front of us and not what happened in that delivery room.
Yeah. I would say a healthy birth experience is one that's created, supported, embraced, and shared. It's everybody's responsibility to make sure that we get to that outcome that we all desire. And I know the role of a Black dad in that. We didn't touch too much on that specific part today, but the role of a Black dad in that room with that support, with that doula, with the family, with the village, is an important one. So
Hey,
that's
Ray,
what I would
maybe
say.
one thing, two things to add. One, I would say I never, as much as I wanted to be a really good dad, I never thought about the birth experience.
Mm.
Right. And it really stood out when Ebony started on her path to be a doula, how many folks had bad birth experience.
Mm.
Part of it was probably because nobody really thought about it, right?
Yeah.
That's why I want a second when you talked about, Black dads. I think Black dads should be as interested or even more interested in making sure that the mom of their child has a doula. You just talked about asking for help and mentorship. We don't have any experience birthing babies, our bodies. And so even when we show up thinking we're doing the right stuff, it sometimes isn't. And that doula really is there to support, I would say, the dad as much as the mom to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that birth experience is right. And so just wanted to really connect maybe that doulas aren't just for the mom. It really is
Right.
that unit that's in that room to make sure that they go home healthy, right? Both mom and child, physically and emotionally.
Beautiful. We can end it right there.
All
All
right.
right, Jameel, close us out.
Yeah, well, thank you all for paying attention to this podcast and the Black Dad Brand podcast. We're so grateful for you guys. Please make sure to check us out on your Spotify, on YouTube, on our website, on our social media, X, Instagram, Facebook. We're on all of it. But also, Ebony, I believe you have a platform too that people can you talked about some of your videos and stuff like that. Can you let us know where they can find you as well?
Yes, so you can find me Naturally Ebony on IG as well as Facebook. And then if you're interested in doula work, ebonybailey.com.
So good to have you both. You guys dropped a ton of gems, and we're grateful to have you on the show. And so thank you all for watching. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you.
Thank you.